briefing. It's protection of Crimean Tatars, right to education, adoption of Crimean Tatar alphabet with Latin characters. Our guests are Elkhan Nuriev, head of the task force on development and adoption of Crimean Tatar alphabet, also Sergiy Parkhomenko, co-coordinator, Anti-Putin Information Front, director of the Center for External Political Research, and Kovarsky, professor, the head of the chair of the University of Culture. First speaker is Elkhan Nuriev. You're welcome. You're given the floor. Good afternoon. On behalf of plenipotentiary of Crimean people, the commission was created, and I'm as advisor of Sergiy Ivanovich. We took an obligation to adopt Crimean Tatar alphabet with Latin characters. There is a special legislation of 1998 of Kurultai of Crimean people, but the situation remains the same. According to the estimates of the experts of UNESCO, Crimean Tatar language is on the brink of extinction. A group of specialists performed a huge chunk of work. These are both national and international experts from Turkey, Azerbaijan. These are representatives of countries where there were reforms to it was done in Turkey by Atatürk, and in 1992, I know that Sergiy carried out a reform, and they use Latin. So this is a Crimean Tatar language, belongs to Turkic language. So this is an ancient language, a pure language from the Turkic group. The Ruska group of language. It's a wonderful language, and the paradox is that in those countries where language reforms was accomplished, that was done in Atatürk government, and in 1930s, Azerbaijan, they also adopted Latin alphabet, and it was made there by a professor, a linguist, and in Pedagogic Institute, the Pedagogic Institute was named after him, and he was killed because of his works. So I would like my colleagues to tell about phonetics. It doesn't belong to Cyrillic alphabet, and the Turkic language used in Tatarstan, and Tatarstan also provided the information that the State Duma of Russian Federation allowed to use a Latin alphabet in Tatarstan, and I can confirm that it is impossible to reflect Crimean Tatar language in Cyrillic alphabet. So I give the floor to one of the experts on this issue, to Professor Mykola Stepanovich Please, you are given the floor. Good afternoon. Maybe I'm not such a great expert in Crimean Tatar language and replacing Cyrillic with Latin alphabet. But all Turkic people who lived in the territory of USSR, they first changed to Latin alphabet, and then those who stayed in USSR, they replaced Latin with the Cyrillic alphabet. Maybe I have a different message to the audience. I remember 1999, it was in Zaporizhzhia University. It was one of the deputies of mayor on education. I don't remember his name, but I said that I will go to some Crimean universities, and he said, oh, there will be an expansion of Crimean Tatar, there will be some Turkish influence, what are you going to do then? And I said, well, I will do something, there's nothing wrong with it. But even then, a person from scientific field was absolutely sure that there is some Crimean threat there. And all the years of independence, the majority of representatives of Ukrainian power were convinced of this. And they believe that something has to be done to incorporate Tatars in Ukrainian community, but they instead created some obstacles. And then, starting from annexation of Crimea, they started to speak about this case, and we should give those dads back. We cannot just return Crimea. Everyone speaks about it, but there are some small steps that can be done, and one of these steps or proposals that were voiced in March at the meeting that Mr. Nuriev told us, there was an idea of introduction into the school curricula of Ukrainian literature, Ukrainian language, and history of Ukraine, geography of Ukraine, separate lessons that will be delivered on literature, language, history, geography, economy, and other different subjects connected with the life of Crimean people in the past and at present. And one of the heads of the department, Mr. Kononenko, took the initiative, and he said that for the half a year they worked on this idea. They said that they will phone me, but they didn't. And we do not know what the progress is, what they proposed. So the lessons on Ukrainian literature, they should study Ukrainian literature and separate words, separate pieces of Crimean literature, because they are a part of common culture. And when studying medieval literature, we can study Dan Muhammad poem Tugay Bey about joint effort of Crimean Tatars and Khmelnytsky troops against Poland. And this is a formal peculiarities there, and also there is some Oriental poetry that was above European at the time, and the same about 19th and 20th century literature. If we are speaking about 5th and 6th form, when they study some lyrics, maybe it won't make any difference if there is a poem of Ukrainian or Tatar poet, but from the very start the children will understand and know that Crimean Tatars, Crimea is a part of Ukraine, and those descriptions of the nature of Crimea or the anthem of Crimean Tatars, what they will unite us as a nation. all of us. So maybe I'm going to continue, and I will give the floor to Sergiy Parkhomenko, co-founder of the Anti-Putin Front, and it is known that information we get from Crimean Peninsula. So Moscow provided Serliks to Crimean students, and 20 or 30,000 manuals are sent there, and they view Crimea as the Russian territory in these editions. So I give the floor to my colleague.
Good afternoon, dear friends. Mission of Anti-Putin Information Front is to strengthen humanitarian component in the battle against Russian aggressor and covering the information about initiatives in Ukraine, in the diaspora in Europe, in Ukrainian diaspora in Europe, Australia, and Canada, because only joint efforts, joint struggle inside Ukraine and outside Ukraine may result in the victory of Ukraine. Elkhan Nuriev today will tell us about our legislative initiative about the draft regulation approving the ABC. He will read the text.
Alphabet.
This is very necessary, this is mandatory, because we have MPs who support us in these reforms and such struggle. We should maximize communication of information to civil society and to governmental officials. Why alphabet is so important in humanitarian area and in informational space. It is very important factors such as alphabet inter alia as concerns certain people such as Crimean Tatars. This is the element of assimilation and empires conquering, which would provide Russia the opportunities to proceed with its manipulations. From this platform, we would like to address the Ministry of Information Policy of Ukraine. Such initiatives as ours, they can help to communicate to civil society, to general public, and to governmental officers with our efforts and the media efforts, joint efforts, coordinated efforts in regulations, in mass media space, we can successfully implement this initiative, legislative initiative of us. This is not one alone sphere of our activities. We have other activities as well, but we also work in the territories conquered by Russia and in the territory of Russian Federation, because if we struggle only inside Ukrainian territory, we will not move ahead. Let us just not to go in opposite direction. Some information activities in the territory of Crimea in the underground. This step seems not to be connected to the warfare. This is the informational communication step. It will provide support to the people in occupied territories where they can start struggle, which will be finalized with the return of Crimea. As we already told today, This initiative is also weighted by many Russians, Turkish speaking.
Turkic speaking.
The so-called junta of Ukraine. It initiates the native people, such as Crimean Tatars, and as the political nation, Ukrainians can have the right for own national language, including in Latin. Very huge works have been conducted, including by the Ministry of Education and Culture. The bureaucratic machinery of Ukraine is has been resisting. It is quite hard to destroy its opposition. Now, the Ministry of Education and Science sent letter to the Ministry of Justice, which should send to academic institutions, National Academy of Science of Ukraine, special requests. We have already passed this way, and the Prime Minister of Ukraine will be submitted our draft. He will have to sign it. Mr. Groifman will have to sign it. It's a draft resolution on Crimean Tatar language and literature. The first point, to approve Latin characters, Crimean Tatar alphabet with Latin characters. Not only with in Ukraine, but also Azerbaijan did that already successfully. The second is the Ministry of Education, along with other agencies and executive authorities, having educational institutions subordinated to them, should take measures to implement transfer of Crimean Tatar alphabet from Cyrillics to Latin characters, and improving professional skills of pedagogical and skills of experts both in secondary schools and in higher educational institutions, in the places where Crimean Tatars people are concentrated, and in higher educational institutions there should be special sections established to learn Crimean Tatar language, and the Ministry of Education, along with other agencies and executive authorities, should not later than June 1st should develop and submit to consideration the draft integrated program of Crimean Tatar language and literature development, and to propose the draft law on education in Crimean Tatar language. And the last point is to bring other legislation of Ukraine into compliance with these new pieces of legislation and resolutions. So the work group has been working since the start of the year. Are there any questions? In Оксанова Кримреlia, I would like to specify how many educational institutions work in Ukraine where Crimean Tatar language could be studied. About 330 children study Crimean Tatar language in Kherson region, and in Bucha, in Prikarpatia, there are also concentrated settlements of Crimean Tatars, and telling the truth, the state has not made successful efforts to improve the situation with studies of Crimean Tatar language and literature. In Crimea, the situation is not good as well. One teacher called me by phone and she told that 30,000 textbooks were brought. I said that I could not find real words, true words. We are talking, we are making our best, we are taking our best efforts to change the situation in the Crimea, but there are no positive messages. We are asking, but with time we will demand from Ukrainian government finally to adopt the relevant regulations, because Crimean Tatar language is threatened with extinction. Are there any more questions? Mr. Professor will tell us more about the national literature of Crimean Tatars, which could be included into the national program, into the development of goals of the concept of Crimean Tatar education.
Maybe not about it, but about other things. So what bureaucrats do in order not to do anything? So they find some obstacles, reasons why it can't be done, and they do not do anything. And a bright example of this, how Latin variant was adopted in 1928. There were some observers, and they said that was enthusiasm. And even illiterate people, they joined the study of the new alphabet, and that this writing was replaced to Latin. And then our bureaucrats, they even don't know when this replacement will be done, and after this high fines were established, and then they are surprised that these matters are resolved quickly, and the enthusiasm among Crimean Tatars is also high. Like at that times in Turkey, and the problem is here we have the 1st of June, so the day of children's rights. So of course we understand that as of 1st September there won't be any manuals in Latin, and maybe this should be adopted. And the example about the ministry, they work for 6 months and there's no result, and the 1 year passed, and the question is this a sabotage or imitation of work? Or it is, as they say, this is a hand of Moscow, that no one wants to do anything, so we should just replace those officials. And lastly, the words. So the replacement for Latin alphabet. Speaking about fines, if officials uses a word from another language, they are fined for this. And they then, if he used these words for the 3rd time, then they could be even fired. So I ask Prime Minister that we should do this. And in Azerbaijan, they don't remember that they wrote in Cyrillics, but from 1930s to 2000 they wrote in Cyrillics, and then they replaced it with Latin, and now they use it successfully. So this is the end of the press conference, and the next event is at 1:30 p.m.